straight from Snowflake rather than going into another infrastructure service. So anybody who don't know who I am, so my name is Kabir Rab. I'm head of technology at Tahola. I've been in this industry for about 15 odd years. Been working with all sorts of different technology vendors, including Oracle, IBM, Microsoft, you name it. I've also worked with lots of different organizations to build data platform and looked at lots of different way of building them. So looked at things like modern infrastructure, such as AWS, GCP, Azure. And I'm also a Click luminary since 2019. And while I'm not doing any of this, I'm a STEM ambassador. I go to school and university, give lectures about data science, talk about data literacy and the importance of data in our general life-to-life things. And while I'm not doing any of this, I've just got to give you a little bit of interesting facts. So while I'm not doing any of this data-related stuff, I'm a keen cricket player and also a coach. Well, very loosely together coach word here. And Jason's probably going to remind me, last time I failed to do this. So I'm not going to mention what this is, so I don't break my rule. I'm not going to mention what this is, but this is one of my other passions. If you go to my house, you will find it everywhere, dotted around on the floor, on display, and this is one of my passions. So moving on from there. And like I said, last talk was quite similar, and as anybody who works with code, you know we love to reuse our materials, right? We love reusable things. What I mean by reusable code block, what I mean is copy and paste. So you probably see a lot of these slides, it's just probably copy and paste from the last one. So today I'm going to talk about container service. Topic of discussion will be what is container. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of brief overview of what container is, and then we'll move into what does it mean in context of Snowflake. And then we'll look at some of the consideration that we need to have in terms of how to deploy, what you need to think about when you're deploying something like this in Snowflake. And then finally, everybody loves this, we'll move into demo, and I will try to show you how it works. Well, I again say try, it may not work. And at the end of it, we'll have a Q&A and I'll take any questions. But meantime, if you do have any questions while I'm going through it, just shout out, I'll be quite happy to answer them, provided I know the answers to it. So what is a container? So a container is like a moving box. Imagine you're a moving house, and you put all your stuff into a box, and you take it from one area to, your old house to new house. And that's essentially what it is. It's a container where you put all your software ingredients into, and then you shift it across from one platform to another platform. It's a bit like everything inside of one box. Just like when you're packaging all your items, you will put all your books in a bookcase. You might want to put all your kitchen belongings in a kitchen case, and it's similar sort of things. You pack everything in isolation, but you also pack everything that you want to put together. So for example, if I'm packing my bookshelf, I'll put all the books in the box as well as anything else that goes in the bookshelf in that box, because that would make it easier for me to just take it out and put it on display. And that's what you do with the software. Software engineers, they put not just the code in there, they also put in any other third-party libraries and anything else that they need to have in order to get the software to work and function properly. And what it does is it keeps things tidy for them. It makes our life a lot more easier. We don't interact with other services that may be running. We don't interrupt with different things that you may have installed in there, and also makes it easier from one environment to another environment, so you can easily move them and shift them. So what is Snowflake container? In terms of Snowpark Container Service, context-wise, a container requires a lot of maintenance. You've got to think about how do we scale it? How do we then manage different parts of the container services? What Snowpark Container Service does for us is it's a managed service. So it essentially takes all of those headaches away from you. And one of the biggest headaches in terms of container services is the security side of things. How do we expose it to the external facing services? How do we allow people to land on our service and consume it? So you have a lot of security consideration that you need to think about when you deploy any container services. Where with the Snowpark, Snowflake is dealing with all of those headaches for us. We don't have to worry about the scalability of it. We don't need to worry about the security side of it. It's actually been dealt with by themselves. You have certain rules and certain network configuration that you need to put in place, but apart from that, mostly been handled by Snowflake. So that makes it a bit more easier. One other advantage, or one of many other advantages, is Snowflake Container Service allows us to run and ingest data and play with and manipulate the data and also work with that data within your Snowflake account without leaving the environment. So imagine if you build a machine learning model in AWS and you have deployed Snowflake in Azure somewhere. And if you have to consume the data into your machine learning environment to do some model building, then you'll have to take that data over the network. Where without being deployed within your network, within the same account, essentially stays containerized within that one environment. It's not leaving that environment. So that security risk has already been removed on that sense. You also get access to your Snowflake stages. So if you have any internal stages or external stages that you have configured for Snowflake to work with, the container service will be able to access those stages and be able to interact with those. And it makes the process a little more refined and a bit more easier for non data science users to be able to deal with that service. They don't need to know intricacy about how to deploy container or how to write Python code. They'll be able to do that using their SQL query if you build a service that way. And what it does is it unlocks a lot of other different functionality for us as well. So it allows us or gives us the ability to run very long running services. So if you have a machine learning model that takes about 7 to 8 hours, or maybe it takes 3 or 4 days to run, you can easily run that by configure and run it through this service. You can also choose what type of compute power do I need. Do I need to run it on a GPU or can I run it on a normal CPU? Based on your workload, you can choose the right one and you can deploy it there as well. You can write back, you can write your application in any type of code you prefer. So some people might say, sorry about that. Some people might say, look, we don't have anybody who can write SQL. We're very good with our Python. By all means, deploy it with Python. Somebody might say, actually, we have a team of data engineers who are very efficient with their C++ or C#. They can write their code in C#, deploy into a container, deploy into Snowflake Interact. So they don't need to be a SQL expert in order to work with data. So it makes it easier for different teams to get involved and work with data. So what does it look like in terms of container service? So shamelessly, I've taken this off Snowflake documentation. Snowflake has an image registry. So the image registry basically their registry where you can actually push your container images to. Once you've put that into the container image registry, you'll be able to run all of these in different code, whichever code you prefer, in a Kubernetes-based cluster. You can choose whether it gets compute using GPU or CPU, so you can balance your workload that way, and obviously Snowflake manage your optimized storage for those as well. So some of the consideration before you deploy or before you start thinking about container service. First thing, what type of container service are you looking to deploy? What is it that you are trying to achieve? Is it going to be a long-running task, or is it going to be just a small, quick job, or is it going to be a web server of such, where it never goes down? So that determines what type of service or what type of container service that you would pick and deploy. The next thing is look at what level of integration do I need. Does my container need to go out somewhere and fetch the data in? So that could be a container service built to ingest data from third-party APIs or maybe from other in-built in-house software as such. Then you can set those external sort of rules and network policies in place in Snowflake, allows your container to be able to handle those scenarios. And then you look at what type of workload do I need to run on. So is that going to be just a data ingestion workload? I don't really mind if it runs over 7 hours. I don't really mind whether it's in CPU or GPU you need to spin on. However, if you're doing some machine learning model, you're building some features within your machine learning model, you may want to run it into GPU. And you've probably seen Snowflake obviously teamed up with NVIDIA, so you have array of GPU that you can actually choose from and deploy them and run the workload there, which makes it a bit more efficient. It gives you the speed that you need, and also you can run large models there as well. And lastly, and I think that's quite important, I think that's very important for all of us, is the roles and security. And all of those can be managed through just like you do for all your other Snowflake stuff that you do. So things like what level of data or which database my container service should be able to see. When the user interact with it, what do they get to see? What do I expose? But you don't want to be exposing sensitive information by mistake. So that is a really good consideration to be had before you start working with container service. Any questions at this point? Okay, let's move on. And it's demo time. I hope you guys are all excited just like they are. So I'll start with a DBT model. So this is very basic DBT model that I've got here. It's essentially what you get when you press DBT in it, and that's what it gives you. It's very simple. It's not doing anything interesting. All it is, I've just got two models in there. They're just selecting 1 and 2 and put it into a table, material as view table. That's all it's going to do. What I've done for this DBT model to work is I've created a Docker container for it. I'm cheating a bit here, so I might have to make this slightly bigger. Maybe too big. So in terms of a DBT container, there are lots of built-in DBT container provided by DBT Labs team. You can actually go and have a look. They have built-in, you can build it by component if you like, or you can just take one with the connectors that you're interested in. And in our particular example, we are interested into the Snowflake connector. So we are saying, go and grab this container with this specific version. I could have just gone with latest, so you would have always, every time I run the build command, you would have built it with the latest version, but I wanted to make sure that I only work with that particular connector version. It gets that one, then runs a DBT version just to check to make sure everything's gone fine. And then it copies everything from the user app directory to the DBT directory, and from DBT directory to that directory, and changes our work directory essentially to this one. What I've done in here is I've passed on some environment variable as well for that container. Essentially, when you build a container service, you probably won't do this. It will define that when you register the service within Snowflake. But for ease of use, I've just put that in there within my container itself. And I've given it an entry point. So as soon as I run my container, it will run DBT run. You may have other things. You may want to run DBT depths. You may want to run DBT test before you do DBT run. You may have other things built into your flow, and you can do all of those things, and you can build that flow command within the entry point if you like. Once I've gone through and built my container itself, then I need to start looking at how can I deploy that container into Snowflake. So let's start with looking at tables. So this is the database and schema where I'm going to run my DBT model on. At the moment, if I run show tables, I can only have two tables. The events table essentially capturing all the events that I run through the container service, and then match data, just a dummy data set that I have in there. So first thing we do is we create a repository container. And if I run show image repositories, you'll be able to see all the repositories that I've created in that account, in that database. So I have 3 repositories in there. I have Snowflake Meetup, which was used on the last presentation that I did. I've also got the Hola Connect, and the one that we are interested in is the SF Meetup DBT. So that's the new repository that I've created within Snowflake. Then I've defined what the compute should look like for my container service to run on. I've picked a very basic one with just one node. If you have a workload that requires multiple processor, you want to scale it up and down, in that case you can actually configure them in this area. Once you've run that command, you will go and create that compute pool for you, and you can run a simple command just to see where your compute currently standing on. So it's on suspended state, that needs to change. So while it's in suspended state, actually, good day it is. While it's in suspended state, we won't be able to create any service or won't be able to deploy anything. So you need to change that to either idle or starting phase. So I'm just going to resume that complete pull, and it does take a little bit of time, so apologies. Starting, so we may have a couple of minutes now. I wasn't accounting for that one. Like I said, demo always a bit tricky. At this point, do you have any questions? Anybody been working around? Okay, there's a question over there.
Sorry, your entry point is DBT run. What happens if I want to do like tests, run like tags? Do I do that all in the same Docker file, or multiple Docker files? Like, what do I do there?
No, you can do in the same Docker point. You don't have to have the entry.
So I just, like, chain them in the entry point, just like forever?
Not necessarily. So you can have a bash script.
Okay.
Does all of this, and you can make the entry point the bash script.
Cool.
And that can chain all of those things for you.
Sorry, I have a question. Where are you running all these codes?
Which codes? These ones?
Yeah, these ones like show image repository.
Oh, so this has been run on a Snowflake environment. It's just Tahola's environment that we have.
CLI or something?
No, this is Snowpark. So Snowsite. So I'm just running on Snowsite. You can run it through CLI if you want. I've not actually played around with the new Snowflake CLI that they've released. Anybody played around with that at all? Anybody had any experience, just out of interest? So there you go. There's an interesting area that you can probably explore if you wanted to. It still says starting. Okay, so it's going to take a little bit of time. While it's taking that time, I'll go through some of the code and see, explain what they're doing. So I mentioned about ingestion, network rules, and things like that you need to configure for your Snowflake container to work. So in this particular example, I've created a network rule that allows me to take any egress from these particular addresses. So I've put two different environments in there. And what essentially means that I'm not limiting my container to just the account where I'm deploying. If I wanted to, I can run it across multiple different environments. So imagine you have a model that's probably generic and produces the models in lots of different accounts, or it needs to be in so many different accounts. You can actually run it across all of them if you wanted to. I've also put OpenAI. That's probably because I was reusing this egress rule, and last demo that I did was based on generative AI. So that's why it's there. Once you've created your network rule, you then associate that with the external access integration. And you define that and you tell it which rule to use. And in our instance, we've assigned that to the one that we've just created. And then underneath all of it, I will be creating a service that will tell my service that use this integration that I've created just above here, and also use the container that I've just put into the repository, and this is what the repository container is called. In here, you can actually pass on the environment variable that I've showed before in my Docker file. You can actually pass them in here and set any of your environment variable. Best practice is to move them into secrets within Snowflake. You can create secrets, and you can use those environment variable pointed to various different secrets. That could be your password, the username, and also different things can go in there. So let's go back, and I'm hoping it is ready, and perfect. We are good to go. So now I'm just going to create the service and hopefully execute it. If everything goes well, I should now see the service being listed on show service list. And there you go. Now we can see our new service being listed in here. And also, now if I look at the tables, because it's a very small DBT model, you'll probably execute within a few seconds. So if I look at the show tables, I should see now 3 tables. You have my first DBT model. And in that table, if I run a select star, which I never recommend anybody to do, but I'm just going to do it myself here. And you can see there's inserted 2 records, 1 and 2.
I think we should just take a second to appreciate that very good live demo.
Considering
Questions?
Yeah, sure.
So the compute pool, like, do you have any information about like the costs associated with that compared to just normal warehouse costs? And also, will it also shut down after you?
You can configure all of those things. So as long as the container service is running, it will stay on continuous on. You can actually choose, just like any other warehouse, you can choose your idling time. So if you set your idling time to be 1 minute or 60 seconds, it will actually shut itself down after 60 seconds. In terms of pricing, there's a price list on the Snowflake website. You can actually have a look and see what the compute or different compute options are available and what the cost point for each of them are. They do vary from different vendors or different environment, depending on where you deploy. At the moment, it's only limited areas in AWS that you can deploy, so there's not many options there. Some of the options, including the one that I'm running now, is not actually listed on their documentation. But yeah, if you speak to the partner or whoever your account manager is, they'll be able to give you all of that information.
So the last thing you did there, I thought, was create a service. I would have thought you would have then had to call the service, but it should create the third table straight away. So I'm not quite getting the event.
Yeah, so the reason why you created the table straight away, because I have a container with an entry point that has dbt run. So as soon as it creates and runs the container, it executes that command. If I didn't have that one, then I would have had to specifically say, go resume that container service and run this as a parameter, and it would have run it through that way.
So when will it run again? What will cause it to run again?
You can set up a task, and within the task, you can say schedule it at different times, and you can say my service resume or service stop, and you can run it through that way.
Or you can use an external orchestration.
See how I opened the question nicely to your platform.
Which one would you recommend?
Sorry?
I was asking you which one he would recommend. Which tool would you recommend?
For running the container service.
Sorry, I was opening the door even further for him to make an advertisement.
I'm not going to recommend anything. I'll leave it up to people to decide. I'm here to share my very little knowledge that I have about the service.
So when you create the service, does it register an API, and you can actually pass in some JSON to that API and get it to take that into account, like running only certain models that were specified as a selector in your JSON, for example?
It depends on how you build your container image. So within the container image, you can call them with lots of different parameters, and if you allow that to take place, yes, you can open it through that way. But it is quite, in terms of this type of service, you probably want to make a very much production-ready code. You don't want to be running your development and things like that from the container service in Snowflake, because it won't make much sense. It will lose the control, the ability to control on how you want to run and how you want to manage your dbt model. It takes that away, really.
Do you know why it takes so long to start the container? Is it Snowflake? Is it dbt? Is it something that might get quicker in the future? It seems to take a really long time compared to running a Docker image just locally on your laptop, say, which can start quickly.
The compute pool is nothing to do with the dbt or Snowflake. They're essentially just compute pools that sit in there within AWS environment where I've deployed the account. So it's just essentially as long as it takes to get that compute pool running.
Getting access to the
Infrastructure, exactly. It's bound by the network and the infrastructure that it's been deployed on. Over time, hopefully, it will get a bit better. It is a bit slow at this point. So if you're not managing this carefully, and if it goes down and you need to have it run very quickly, very responsive way, then you might want to reconsider of deploying the code slightly differently, or have less idle time so you never get suspended.
How far away to edit, let's say, storage integration code? Now, I needed to drop the whole thing, amend my code, and recreate it from scratch. What would you recommend, let's say, you had a new access integration in the sense?
Yeah, so I was going to actually share that on my next slide. So this is obviously a production-ready code, and is for demo purposes, it doesn't give you that flexibility. Where you want to be able to deploy a code where developers can make changes to your dbt model and different storage or different tables, and then commit that to GitHub, and then able to run it on Snowflake without having to go into Snowflake and change it to container image they have in Snowflake. So that would be my best friend. That's one of the areas that we are actually working on and we are building. We're building a bit more defined workflow where we're not just running DBT, we're also doing DBT docs and publishing the DBT docs onto a Azure Static Apps, which getting exposed to all of the data engineering team and also analytics team so they can actually look at the models and look at the metadata behind it. So moving on from that one, see, it's really nice thought how all the question was put in place right times. So this is one of the examples that we could do with container services. You could have a container service rather than having the DBT being hosted in one place. You can just put your bash script in there. Essentially what the bash script would do is run a GitHub CLI, pull a repository from GitHub, and then execute DBT, run all your DBT commands, do all your workflow, and do the manipulation, and then put it into the database. So in this particular example, we have a bash script that pulls the latest version from a particular branch, and that then builds all the models and writes into the Snowflake database. Once it's done that, it runs the DBT docs command, puts it into another branch where we host all our documentation for it, compares and see if there's any changes. If there's any changes, it makes commit to that branch. Once it gets committed, it runs a GitHub Actions, which essentially pushes that documentation onto Azure Static Apps for everybody to view that documentation. So you can augment all of those different things and make a really nice streamlined process whereby everything running seamlessly. You can do a lot more complex than that. If you have other tools that you are running, if you have ingestion tools that you want to build in rather than using some cloud services, you can put that onto that flow as well. So that way you can trigger off your ingestion tool first, then run your DBT model. If there's an issue with the DBT model, you can send out an email alert and then do other things to it to make sure that everybody's been alerted. So you can do all of that flow and build that within this. So that's it. That brings to the end of this.